And
Thank
you
you.
can share the slides if you want. I think you have the link, Crystal, or I could drop it in the chat.
Yes, either one would be perfect.
I will find it and drop it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we move on to Proposition 26, which is in-person sports wagering on tribal lands. And both,
can you hear me?
Yes, Martha Manastrino will be presenting. And Martha, you can explain, how much you and Christoph either worked together or didn't. I don't know the details on that.
Okay, so let's see. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to state up front that I'm not a gambler or a bettor, and so I'm probably not the best person to research these propositions. However, as a conscientious voter, I did want to have more information about these propositions, both of which expand gambling quite a bit. The League of Women Voters doesn't take positions on candidates, but it does on propositions. However, they did not endorse either Proposition 26 or 27. The California Democratic Party advised voting no on 27, but they're neutral on Proposition 26. So moving along to Proposition 26, the way it is now, tribal casinos in California can offer poker, bingo, and other games, but sports betting, roulette, and dice games are illegal in tribal casinos and everywhere else in California. So what would it do if it passes? It would legalize in-person sports betting, roulette, and dice games in tribal casinos. It will legalize in-person sports betting at 4 horse racetracks. It will allow private lawsuits against illegal gambling in some situations. As far as the budget effect, Proposition 26 could raise up to tens of millions of dollars each year in revenue from casinos, horse racetracks, and fines from lawsuits. Regulating in-person sports betting could reach the low tens of millions each year. So it seems to me, as I understand it, that would kind of counteract, or we wouldn't, raise as much money and revenue because of regulations. So as far as people in favor of 26, a yes on 26, they say that it authorizes sports wagering in person at tribal casinos. It limits sports wagering to adults only. It supports Indian self-reliance by providing revenue for tribal education, healthcare, and other vital services. It promotes safe, responsible gaming and helps stop and prevent illegal gambling. Proposition 26 would allow California's tribes to provide vital services like healthcare, housing, and infrastructure and education to tribal members. The people that are against it say that Proposition 26 is a massive expansion of gambling that will lead to more underage gambling and addiction. Proposition 26 is sponsored by 5 wealthy gaming tribes who want to expand their monopoly on gambling to include sports betting. At the same time, Proposition 26 will destroy local jobs and hurt communities of color. Proposition 26 is a special interest giveaway that hands millions to horse racetracks, a lifeline to a dying business that abuses animals and has led to the death of more than 1,600 horses over the last 10 years. I did not know that. So the people that are against Proposition 26, this was actually from a flyer that I received in the mail 2 days ago, or yesterday, I guess. And the taxpayers against special interest monopolies are against it. People like the mayor of Compton, Emma Sharif, she's against it. Julian Canetti, CEO of California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, is against it. Siobhan Moore is a CAGE member. I'm not sure what that is, the American Federation of State, County of Municipal Employees. She's against it. And Jay King, a flyer just came this morning. This Jay King, who's president of the California Black Chamber of Commerce, he is also against it. And please note that Native American tribes are the main contributors to the yes on Prop 26. So moving on to Prop 27. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that each state can decide whether to legalize sports betting. Sports betting is illegal everywhere in California, including tribal lands. So what would happen if it passes? It would legalize online sports betting in California, not on tribal lands, because the Indian tribes are against Proposition 27. So it would legalize the online sports betting for people 21 and over. Bets could only be placed through a gaming tribe or qualifying businesses. Most of the revenue from betting fees and taxes would address homelessness and the mental health needs of people who are homeless. The rest of the money would support Native American tribes. And the budget effect is legalizing online sports betting could raise up to the mid hundreds of millions of dollars each year, but regulating online sports betting could cost up to the mid tens of millions of dollars each year. So people against it are saying that regulating online sports, people in favor of 27 are saying that regulating online sports betting would protect gamblers and end illegal online gambling operations. The measure would guarantee extra funding to address homelessness and mental health in California. But I put a note in here that some of the mayors are actually in favor of 27. People like Libby Schaff, who have a tremendous homeless population in their cities, are kind of in favor of 27. So, however, people that are against it are the large out-of-state gambling companies. They say that the large out-of-state gambling companies would profit off of Californians and block smaller operations from the market, which I think is true. Online gambling is not a solution to homelessness or other social ills. And I believe that it's just not, and will open more people to gambling addictions. Proposition 27 would also send 90% of profits into the pockets of out-of-state gambling corporations without creating new jobs or making any real investments in the state of California. Moreover, Proposition 27 explicitly sidesteps the general fund. Not a single penny of tax revenues would go to state priorities like public schools, wildfire prevention, or emergency response. It's interesting to note that if both of these pass, and it is possible that that could happen, then both would take effect. However, if the court finds that parts of the propositions are in conflict with each other, the one that received the most yes votes will be the law. The biggest donors in support of Proposition 27 are sports betting and digital gaming entertainment companies. So groups that are against it are the Coalition for Safe, Responsible Gaming, California Indian Tribes. Shay Franco Clausen, she's been on TV. I've seen numerous ads. She's a mom, and I think she used to be a member of the Sunnyvale Dems. And I've just seen her, and she's against it. Mainly, she thinks it's unsafe for children, that they'll develop a, they'll have access to the online, and it would be very harmful and possibly lead to addiction. And then a couple of weeks ago, I saw an op-ed, George Skelton. I don't know anything about him, but he's a columnist for Los Angeles Times, and he called these a lousy bet and advised voting no on both of them. And then an addiction medicine specialist, Dr. Anna Lemke, I think her name is. She also thinks that it would increase gambling addiction. And of course, the California Democratic Party is against it. And also today, earlier today, I found a Kendra Lewis, who is a homeless advocate. And remember, that was that what they're trying to convince us of is that 27 will help the homeless. Well, she's a homeless advocate saying no, vote no on it. So in my opinion, I think that passing either of these propositions will increase gambling in our state. And I don't want California to become known as a gambling state. I'll leave that title for the state of Nevada. The last thing California needs is more gambling. And I also think there are better ways to address the homeless situation. In addition, I believe the regulatory costs will outweigh the gains of either of these propositions. And so I did look at the polling data, and I don't know if you want to just look at this. And there wasn't much polling on Prop 26. So it looks like it's up for grabs because there's quite a bit of undecided in the right-hand column. And so who knows what could happen. So I don't know how much you believe in polls, but anyway, there it is. And then for Proposition 27, there was quite a bit, and it was all over the place. So, and if you compare it to the bottom one, the University of California, which is what the Prop 26 poll was, they actually have it possibly passing. So that's what it is. And that pretty much completes all the information I have. So, if anybody has any comments or questions.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Would you mind showing the slide 8 again? I wasn't able to see the polling data. I don't know if that didn't come through for others as
Yeah,
well.
I couldn't either, but now it was just there. Okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to it the first time.
Yeah. All right, so when people wish to speak or ask questions, since these were presented one after the other without discussion in between, if you do have a question, try to direct it toward a particular proposition. Is it 26 or 27? And but there may be some cases where you have something to say about both of them, which is okay. Just make clear that you're talking about both. Okay, Max.
All right, regarding both, I would like to, if I can have a chance to share this. Let me see if I can get.
So do I unshare?
Yes, please.
There we go.
There.
Okay, so I've gotten a list of the various newspapers that have been endorsing it. So 26, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Mercury News, and the Los Angeles Times all came out against it. 27, in addition to that, you get even more people against it, very few people for it. For people who may not know, I do regularly do these election research posts where I just gather together all the information that I use in making a decision. And now this should be showing you, let's see, everyone's seeing in red. You can hear Pete Rates the Propositions is a guy who does very good analysis on the propositions every year. And he points out that these are just bad deals. Even if you think gambling is a good idea, these only give 10% of profits to the state. New Hampshire and Rhode Island collect 51%, Pennsylvania, 34%, Tennessee, 20%, Illinois, 15%. Even New Jersey gets 13%. So giving only 10% to the state is just a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
So the sensible thing for Californians to do would be to reject this proposition, and then probably the gambling interests will approach the state legislature and cut a deal that might actually give the state a better share of the funding.
Thank you, Max. It's super helpful to know the context between what happens in other states.
And let me give you, here is a link in the chat to my election research post. And here is a link to that exact bit in Pete Rates the Propositions, for anyone who cares to read up on it.
Thank you. James.
Yes, I just have a comment or an attitude about both of these propositions. I guess 26 allows, it's positive as it allows monies to go into the general fund. 27 allows monies to go for specific purposes, good purposes. But I look at both of these as taxes, just of a different type of tax. And what I dislike very much about it is it's a kind of a hidden tax, because it kind of looks like free funding for social needs without actually taxing people. And of course, the opposite is true. The people who are being taxed are the people who are most likely to engage in the gambling. And those, I think, often are the people who are least able to provide the funding, who are able to pay this tax. So I think it's just a bad idea in principle for both of these, very bad. And I don't think it's good for the health of our state.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you.
How do you say in reactions no?
Well, could I suggest that we everybody clear their reactions before putting in new reactions?
I'm trying to, I should be able to do that, but I can't figure out how to.
It's probably under participant and go to the very bottom.
I don't see it there, but let me try it another way.
Actually, what are we're just saying no to.
Oops.
Yeah, before we do start voting, or not voting, because this is not a vote, it's a straw poll.
Here we go. I got it. Okay.
Okay, they're cleared. All right, does anyone else want to speak on either of these propositions?
Yeah, I'm also opposed to them, but you know, there is a consideration about, it's not like sports gambling doesn't exist, right? It does exist. It exists illegally, which means you have a big illegal operation out there with billions of dollars, and they're against the law now, which means the other ways they do business are not necessarily above board. So, there would be an argument like with the lottery, right, to legalize something that's already happening so it can be regulated. Still doesn't mean these are particularly good propositions. I don't think they are. The Mercury News said that these should be rejected, and the legislature should do their job, which is pass something, that is more balanced. And then if something turns out that it's not, for some reasons, part of it isn't working, they can fix it. Where these propositions are then very hard to adjust if they have an unforeseen consequence. So.
Yeah, I had a question about 26, which seems, of the two, to me, the lesser bad. My question is about, the Indian tribes already have in-person gambling, like casino type gambling. And this seems to add on the sports gambling aspect. Is that, would that be regulated and done in the same way as the regular kind of casino type gambling, and then just add on sports? Or are there different rules for sports than the existing types of gambling that are happening?
That wasn't really clear in the description. I would imagine it would be a lot more difficult to regulate and more expensive. Yeah, anybody else have any ideas?
Tara.
I do think there is a problem that is an ongoing problem with legalizing this kind of big gambling, where you have a great deal of crime that is also associated with this. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's not legal in California, so they can't do it openly. And yes, they're going behind the scenes, but they have a lot of other crime that's associated with this. So I'm very much against bringing in sports betting into California. I'm very much against that. I don't think it's a healthy social kind of thing to do, even though it's people's choices. But I think it's just a bad thing, and access to it enables people who already have problems to get into deeper trouble. So this does not seem to be good to me, and I don't believe it to be good policy either as far as the monies go. So not on my list to vote for. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else wishing to speak on either of these two propositions?
Like people are voting.
It does look like there's votes already going in. Or opinions.
Is this for 26, or is it for both?
Let's make this for 26 and do a separate, and then we'll clear it and do another one for 27.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried to find out if our local Indian tribes, the Muwekma or Amamutsun, had taken a position, but I couldn't find any evidence that they had. And, there may be issues with their tax exempt status or whatever that constrain them, but that would be interesting to know. But neither one of them have any land, so they have no casinos, and maybe they really don't have a dog in this hunt.
Right. Does anybody know how many tribes actually have casinos? or what percentage at least of, there are many tribes in the state. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I was curious too. Where's the nearest Indian tribe owned casino to us? If anybody knows that too.
No.
It might be the ones that are in
gamblers
Sonoma
there.
County. It might be Sonoma County.
Roanoke Park.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's Sonoma.
Hmm.
I'll unmute.
I have a question comment if I can do it.
Yeah, go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, I really don't object to gambling, especially at the Indian casinos. And I'm surprised that they don't allow dice games and roulette. And I guess my question is, why does it have to be a proposition that expands gambling rather than going through the legislature? Because I've been to the Indian tribes both in Palm Springs and Roanoke Park. And I think there's one closer to Napa. Anyway, I've been there. They have slots and stuff, but they don't have roulette, and they don't have a couple other games. But anyway, what I don't understand is why the Indian tribes aren't working through the legislature to expand that type of gambling. I am totally opposed to these online gambling because I think it really does addict a lot of people, and it's not just kids. It's also a lot of older citizens that may live in, what do you call them? Assisted living and that kind of stuff, where they have a computer and they don't understand that they're gambling away all their money. I just see that as a real deep hole of decadence. But I don't understand why that if they want roulette and they want other forms of gambling in casinos, I don't understand why they don't go to the
I'm sure they have,
process.
Gail, but they haven't been successful. This goes, the whole ballot measure process in California is intended to go around the legislature.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's lots of people like me that don't mind the Indian casinos having other forms of betting. But that's just my point of view.
Sure.
But I do oppose both of these propositions.
Yes, Carol, go ahead.
Oh, that's good information in the chat.
Oh, I was saying that the thing is that I too have nothing against people going, who can get there on their own if they choose. And I'm thinking, would this, 26 really benefit the Native American population? Certainly with building schools, etc. But the online, I'm really opposed only because I'm so concerned that kids would get online. But I don't think kids are going to be allowed into the casino proper. Isn't that true? So I'm mixed. I really don't know how I'm going to vote yet on 26. Okay, I just wanted to let Gail know I kind of feel the way she does.
Okay, thank you. Sandy, go ahead.
So apologies for being kind of vague because I didn't take the time to really research this one, but I guess it's 26. The card clubs are opposing because they will lose out. It will be competition for the card clubs, I think. And that's all I knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Margaret?
The ads for these two propositions have been running for about 4 months. I mean, months before anybody was even thinking about the election. At least I wasn't paying much attention to the election. And the thing that concerns me is the money behind it. I'm very suspicious of the money behind it because TV ads are exorbitantly expensive. And somehow or another, maybe the tribes have that kind of money. If they've got that kind of money, they can put it into schools or something else. But I'm very suspicious of that amount of money being put toward these two propositions. And from the get-go, when I saw that 2 months ago, I said, who's behind all this?
Yeah.
And that right away turned me off. And I've heard several other people say the same thing. Where's the money coming from? I'm not going to vote for it. So I'm really against both of these, just partly because so much money has been spent on the ads, and you're wondering where the money's coming from.
Yeah. And I don't like the deceptive nature of them, you know, that they're supposed to help the homeless, you know, that bothers me too.
All right, any others who wish to speak? And Mike, maybe we could clear the, looks like we have a consensus here among.
So this was 26.
Yes.
Right? So.
All right, and then a straw poll for 27. Interesting that the later polling data was showing a higher percentage of support than earlier polling data. Possibly because of all that money.
Sure, it depends on how they ask the question too.
Yes.
And some of the 27 ads don't mention gambling at all. You would think if you look at the ad that it's a vote to give money for the homeless, which obviously is not the main thrust of the bill at all.
I had a terrible, ironic thought that if someone was so addicted to gambling and they lost their home and became homeless, then at least there would be funds to support them. Terrible, terrible. Okay, shall we move on to the next one? Okay, so Proposition 28 is on arts and music education funding. And we have Tara, who has graciously accepted this challenge.
Okay, so Prop 28 is the initiative for arts and music in public school. And this is funded by the PTA of California and funded by the Californians for Arts and Music, and funded and they created that commission, and the California Teachers Association are supporting that. So there was no opposition to this. It produces no new taxes. It does allow more money for music in both music and arts in both public and charter schools, and additional money for underserved schools. So, and most of the money should go for people and instructors in the programs. So it's 80% of the money will go to staff, balance to training and supplies, and up to 1% can be spent by the governing boards for administrative costs. But the real deal is that it goes to people to fund the arts and music in the schools. And so the short and sweet part is pros were 100%. There was no cons that were listed online. So no new taxes, slightly reallocated from the general fund, 1/10 of 1%. It has additional support for poor schools, and it supports high school graduates to go to most colleges. That was some of the problems for not having arts in the schools, meant that they weren't, high school students were not meeting application requirements to go to college. The basic line is here, we're moving from STEM to STEAM. And this is from the science. And when we went to, as an educator, okay, I have an opinion on this. A very strong opinion on this. And we went from just STEM, and it was the poorer schools that had to cut out all the arts in order to make they comply with all the government STEM requirements. And so they're the very ones that need it the most. There is a direct correlation between arts, music, and improvement in math, science, and verbal skills in school children. So it was a wrong decision just to go to STEM as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, that's what we did. There was one group that had a con, and that was our Bay Area News Group. Their big complaint was it cost too much, and schools are already paid too much of the budgets, and there's no need. None of this is related to what the research actually says, and there is just a direct correlation between people going through the arts and music and science and math improvement. And more recent research just came up with these findings that people who go through STEAM are more likely to apply to more colleges than non-arts students. And 21% are more likely to attend post-secondary institutions than non-arts students. And both groups are just as likely to pursue STEM majors as non-art students. So it doesn't deny either one, and they're both just as likely to receive scholarships as their non-arts peers. So it's not disadvantaging either side. Okay, so I'm happy with the research. And I think I have more information here, but that's really the big deal as far as I'm concerned. And we already have a couple of questions, so are you going to manage the questions, Crystal, or do you want me to?
It may be easier for you to do it just because we're in the same room and we won't.
Okay, so Carol is up first.
Okay, I want to be sure. Yeah, I'm heard. I want to back you up 500% because I am a retired instructor as well. My background is theater arts, and I was teaching for many years at Foothill College in a program where students who came up through special ed came to me, and I created the drama classes for that particular program. And I, for their finals, I would always put on a show so that their parents could come and see what they did. And I'll always remember this one young student who was so timid. When I met her, she could barely say her name. And her parents got the opportunity to see her perform on a stage. What a difference. So 500, 600, 1,000%. Absolutely.
Thanks, Carol. Roy. As another educator.
I'm all for spending, supporting arts and music in schools. I think it's very bad policy to cut it out. What causes me to oppose this initiative is the requirement that a specific percentage of the budget be spent on that. This is a carve out. That is what our legislature is for. There are lots of appealing causes that ought to be funded, and that's what representative government is all about. And the more we do this, we're tying the hands of the state legislature, and it's just plain bad government. I mean, what's the next one? Why don't we carve out a few tenths of a percent to support special needs students? we do support them. Maybe some people believe we're not supporting them enough. There's one good cause after another. And everyone that we do this essentially damages democracy, damages representative democracy, and weakens our legislature. So just if it were important, if it is important to do this, which I think it is, then that's up to local school boards and the state legislature for school districts that are funded by the legislature.
Thank you. Max.
I agree with that. As an engineer, I understand how difficult it can be to deal with a problem that is overly constrained. And this creates extra constraints that makes it hard to do your job if you're a legislator. If this were legislation, I would support it. But because it's a ballot initiative, I don't support it.
Thank you. Gail.
Yeah, I always have an opinion. Okay, so I went to school a long time ago when we had arts, and I have to tell you, I was in both the band and the orchestra and the chorus, and I loved all three of those classes because it was the only classes where you got a whole bunch of kids working together to do stuff. And it wasn't like, you know, an English class where one kid at a time talks. You know, in a band, we all played. We had a great director, and it really taught me the first patience, because they had a, you know, you had to concentrate on other, I was a clarinetist, so, you know, sometimes he would have the bugles play or the drums or whatever. So you had to listen to those kids play. So you had to be nice and listen. But the other thing is when you all performed at once, it was such a wonderful feeling because, you know, 40 kids doing something all together that sounded good was really fun. And I did it both in band and orchestra and in chorus. And it was really fun. And I never do drama, but I'm sure it's the same thing. The thrill of performing a play. I mean, I think it gives kids a lot of confidence, and I'm all for this. And I don't like propositions typically, but this one in particular, the legislators aren't willing to do it. And this is a form of democracy because it's coming from the people. So, you know, that's that argument. But thanks. And yeah, I used to play the clarinet. I was second seat. Thanks.
Thanks, Gail. James.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to, I find myself that Tom and Max pretty much made most of my points. I think I only have really maybe 1 or 2 points. And that is first of all, this, assuming that accepting the argument that this is a very good thing to do, that maybe it should be done. I don't understand why the legislature didn't get a crack at this, at doing this. And if they did get a crack at doing this and they decided against it, then I'd like to know why. If we do this, if we vote for this in here, we're operating blind, because what we're doing is it's really a budgeting, it's an allocation of resources, and we're taking that 1% that we're taking away from the general fund is 1% taken away from every other program that's funded by that general fund, and without us knowing what it is that we're depriving. We have to have, the only way to do this intelligently is to look at this program in the context of all of the other programs that are being done, and then we can make a relative judgment as to which ones are most important and prioritize them. But this way, we're looking at it with blinders on. We only are looking at this one program, looks absolutely wonderful, but we don't know the context of who we're hurting when we do this. And with this one program, it doesn't sound bad because it's just 1%, but we've got 1% this for 1% for that, given through these initiatives, and next thing you know, you're talking real money and you're really hurting other programs that aren't on the proposition list. So to me, a way of thinking is, why isn't this being done by the legislature? That's the place that budgeting should be done.
Okay, thank you, James. Pat.
Tara, just to clarify that, this is a carve out from the existing school budget, right? Or is it pulled out of the general fund?
No, this is 1/2 of 1% out of the general fund that is reallocated to the schools, 70% that goes to the schools, the regular across all the schools, and then an additional 30% go to the poorer schools. So yes, it is a carve out of 0.5% from the general fund that is now going to be allocated to the education. It also it changes it varies, of course, with the funding available. So that would change in proportion to the amount of funding within the general fund as well.
Are you saying this is additional money to the schools?
Yes.
Above and beyond what they normally get. I see.
Above and beyond what they normally get. Yes, this is a 0.5% that goes out of the general fund and is reallocated to the schools. So, okay.
Well, I'll put a plug in for music in the schools because it actually is very helpful in math.
Yes, it is.
And people that take music are generally better in math. So I think that's, it's not just a frill. These things are not frills.
Let me go back to Pat, who was next in line.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Didn't see.
I don't think anybody's saying that we are against music or arts in the school. I think it's very important. I just think it's not clear where the money's coming from. That needs to be explained a lot better to get my vote.
Okay, thank you, Pat. And Julia?
I think Dolores was before me.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, you're quite right. Thank you. Dolores, my apologies. Dolores, you're not unmuted yet. There we go. Still, if you would unmute.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, I have probably a bit of a biased attitude because I've performed in theater since seventh grade, I guess, middle schooler. But also, from what I understand, it's kind of a bedrock for other things as far as how to develop critical thinking and it applies to other things when students become adults and go out into the world and go to work, because there's very valuable skills. This may seem like just a little outlying little hobby thing, but these kind of arts and music bases, they provide diversity in thinking. And I mean, there's just so many benefits from it that I really think it's well worth it. And then I think I saw in the presentations that not with our club, but in the booklet, it says that it protects existing education funding and does not raise taxes. So I'm not sure why we can't do it, but maybe someone else can tell me.
It's a reallocation of taxes that are already collected. So you are taking taxes out of the general fund and putting them into the school. So it is taxpayer paid, okay, and it will benefit both public and charter schools.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dolores. Julia.
So I just want to say I feel very angry because I feel trapped. I really appreciate what I agree with what Roy and Max said, and I particularly appreciate Roy taking that position because I know how much music means to him. His son and my son went through Homestead together, and they were basically buddies in the music program. And neither of them went into the arts, but both went to STEM. So And then Gail has always taught me that we do not, how did you say it? We do not legislate by proposition. I think that's what Gail has always said. So here's this really, really important program. And you know, we should not vote for it because the legislatures should be doing their job, like James was asking. But then if we don't pass it, is somebody going to point to this as, haha, the voters don't support this?
Yes.
Don't support more funding for the arts. So I feel really trapped.
Thank you, Julia. Sandy.
The California State PTA has endorsed this, and I dropped some links for their endorsement, and they have a PDF that's a longer analysis. You know, I agree with everything Julia said. It should be happening, but our schools are habitually underfunded. They have been for many years, and there's a lot of business interests that like to leap in there and say, we've got to get kids more STEM, more STEM, more STEM, so that we can get our science and technology drones out there in our offices. And we're cheating the kids out of a comprehensive education. So we shouldn't have to legislate through propositions, but in this case, I'm going to vote yes, because kids deserve a comprehensive education.
Thank you, Sandy. And James.
I'd just like to say, I believe we're going to vote yes for the same reasons that Sandy described. At the same time, I'm just registering a protest about the way this is being done. There ought to be some way to put the fire, take the torch and put it to the feet of the legislatures so that they stop doing this, because they're putting us into impossible situations where we ourselves are not competent to make these decisions. Thank you.
Okay, any last comments here? I'm going to also make a comment. When we switched our education system to being supported instead of directly by the taxes, to being supported more by the lotto, they cut a lot of the funding out of the general fund for education. So I find this to be a kind of a legal way of getting it back in a way. And so the issues here, it's not just STEM versus STEAM, but it's also what the STEAM brings to it in terms of our innovation and creativity. Is also part of that. So we find people, wonderful crossovers for STEM people who have then gotten some arts and then also opened up. So I think we have, do we have a second comment from Julia and Gail? Not, okay, Gail, did you want to say something more?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned I went to California schools. I was also, and I don't know if this is related, but when I went to school, I participated in forensics and debate. And I don't know if this is the case anymore, but the high school that I went to, they got buses for us almost every Saturday to go to speech tournaments, and all of that was free. And my mother used to volunteer to be a judge in these things. And we would go all the way down to San Jose, you know, would leave at 6 o'clock in the morning and get to these schools down in San Jose. And I don't think those programs exist anymore either. And I think kids are really getting ripped off by not being able to participate in other than sports, where they get to be in a team and get to go to other places to participate. And I think it's really important to have these kind of outlets, whether it be speech or drama or the arts, especially orchestras, because even with our orchestra, we used to, one year we got into the state finals, and we went to Santa Barbara, University of Santa Barbara for a competition on orchestras. And then I also was in the choral, and we went to another UC campus. But all of these things were just so much fun for me, and allowed me to, my family didn't have a lot of money, and allowed me to travel with a bunch of kids that I really liked in buses. And I'm telling you, these were wonderful experiences. And this is a California that doesn't exist anymore. And that's it. Thanks.
And Roy.
One of the reasons that the California that Gail was referring to doesn't exist anymore is because of Proposition 13, which was the ultimate carve out, basically tying the legislature's hands and preventing local voters from raising their own property taxes to support their own schools. All of these carve outs, all of these restrictions on the legislature are destructive to representative democracy.
All righty. For a proposition that that didn't get any cons put up for it in the no committee was formed against this. It's interesting that we have as a diverse opinions on this as we do. So over to you, Crystal.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mike, would you be able to clear the screen?
I think these are
these are new votes. Okay. All right. So please put in your straw vote opinion into the reactions, and we will need to move on from this topic. Okay, let's move on to the next proposition, which is number 29 on kidney dialysis clinics. And Roy has agreed to share some information with us on this proposition.
Okay, so there are about 80,000 Californians who have end-stage renal disease, otherwise known as kidney failure. I'm one of them, who go 3 times a week to a dialysis clinic, and we sit in a chair for 3 hours or so and get our blood cleaned, read a book, eat lunch, listen to podcasts, and then go home and continue with our lives. These clinics are non-union, and the Service Employees International Union believes they should be union. So they brought this proposition forward, essentially as a threat to the clinics, telling them, if you won't unionize, we're going to keep doing this and bleeding you of money until you agree to what we want. I generally support the Service Employees International Union, but sometimes they can be heavy-handed. So the question is this really necessary? What it does is it requires that all of the dialysis clinics that we go to have on staff either a physician, a physician's assistant, or a, what's the last one here? Wait a minute. Hang on. I got this. Nurse practitioner. Okay, so the clinic I go to, it's called Satellite Dialysis Center. It's not one of the big 2 in the state. It's up on Wolf Road near Lowe's, Lowe's department or Lowe's store. And we have both nurses there and technicians. The technicians actually do most of the hooking up. So they come over, stick the needles in me, operate the equipment, and check up every half hour, check my blood pressure, and then at the end, disconnect me. Previously, before I got the access in my arm where it's by needles, the access was through 2 tubes that were in my chest, which is a somewhat dangerous way of doing it. The advantage is that it can be the day they put the tubes in, they can be used, and I needed dialysis right away in December. But if getting the access in your arm requires surgery and several weeks of recovery. So when you need it right away, you need the tubes in your chest. So I had tubes in my chest, and it works well, but you have to be very careful with that because infection can be a problem. So those have to be dealt with only by the nurses, and the nurses are registered nurses. And at least at Satellite, I can't speak for all of the clinics, but at Satellite, the technicians and the registered nurses are really high quality. I mean, they're friendly, they know what they're doing, they're careful, and they take good care of us. So whether or not they should be unionized, from my point of view, is up to them. There are state laws in California that set up procedures for when employees want to be unionized. And for all employees, there are benefits and disadvantages to being unionized. And it's up to them to make that decision. From what I can tell, most of the employees would prefer not to be unionized because there's really very little unionizing effort going on at these clinics. So that's sort of the political and power dynamics of what's going on in this initiative. Let's talk about the question about whether or not they need a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner. And my opinion is no. The nurses are really top quality and know what they're doing. Registered nurses need a bachelor's degree and considerable training, and they do their job and they do it well. I have a doctor at PAMP who I see once a month. He comes into the clinic occasionally and visits all of us to make sure we're doing well there. He knows what's going on. He does not need to be on site. There have been several times when I've been there that I've seen medical emergencies in some of the patients. And they call an ambulance and the patient is pretty quickly whisked off to the hospital. The nurses will stabilize the patient while the ambulance is on the way and when the ambulance comes. But if there were a physician there, there's really not a whole lot the physician can do that the nurse can't do, given the amount of equipment and other supplies that are at the clinic. So I don't see any need to have a physician, a physician's assistant, or a nurse practitioner on site. The Service Employees International Union spent very little money on this initiative. They spent several $1,000s just gathering signatures, and then they basically dropped it. There's no advertising in favor of it, and basically they forced the clinics to spend tens of thousands of dollars in negative ads to try to kill it. And this is the third time they've tried to do this. The first two times the ballot measures were defeated, and this one will probably be defeated too. So I'm voting no, and I recommend everybody else votes no too. So I'm not in charge of the screen here if anybody wants to speak out or ask questions. Mike, can you do that?
Yeah, it looks like Max has a comment.
Yep, I am in general pro-union. I am not pro this tactic. I will be voting against it.
Go ahead, Sandy.
Is this in any way different than the previous times this has been on the ballot?
I think there are a few differences. This one requires that any physician who owns more than 5% of a dialysis clinic has to publicly disclose that. I don't remember if the other two did that. That's just to prevent conflict of interest. I've never asked my physician if he had any interest in Satellite. I don't think he does.
So but it's not, I mean, the other one, I mean,
they're fundamentally the same.
I think you answered my question. This one didn't make it broader who was a valid person to be on site than the previous ones.
And I can't speak for all clinics, but I do know that the one I go to is a very high quality operation.
Okay, Agnes.
So Roy, you're saying that this is forcing unionization? Is that, am I correct to understand that's what you were saying?
The reason why Service Employees International Union brought this was to use as a club against the companies, and they're going to tell them, look, we're going to keep making you spend all these tens of thousands of dollars to defeat these initiatives until you compromise with us.
Oh, not a good idea. Thank you.
And if you have disagreements on that reasoning, read the Mercury News editorial on this issue.
Martin.
Yeah, if we were getting a ballot measure that was directly aimed at accomplishing what SEIU wants, I might be willing to consider that. If we were considering a ballot measure to simply socialize the dialysis clinics and therefore making this completely a state issue going forward, I might consider that. If we're just but I'm not interested in dealing with ballot measures that are negotiating tactics that have no actual interest, where the sponsor has no actual interest in the merits of the proposition passing.
All right, any other comments on this proposition? If not, I see people have put their yays or nays in. Anyone else? Well, let's go ahead and do the straw poll. All right. Next, we are going to go on to Proposition 30, which is the tax on personal income greater than 2 million to fund air pollution reduction and prevent wildfires. And I'm going to be presenting on that topic. Just a minute here. All right, so you can see my screen. Okay, so yes, it's okay. I'm a little bit low on power. I don't have a backup or a plug, and so I may have to transition to Tara's computer since she's right next to me at some point, but I think I can get through the presentation. Okay, so Proposition 30 provides funding for programs to reduce air pollution and prevent wildfires by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million. And this is an initiative statute. Okay, so this is from the official voter information guide. There is a fiscal impact of increased state revenue ranging from $3.5 billion to $5 billion annually. This new tax does go for up to 20 years. It can be, if certain conditions are met with greenhouse gas reduction, it can be terminated early. But a yes vote means taxpayers would pay additional tax of 1.75% on personal income above $2 million annually. And this revenue would support zero emission vehicle programs and wildfire response and prevention activities. So the no vote means there would be no change to the taxes on personal income over 2 million. All right, so I put in this graph also from the voter information guide, and it shows how the money would be spent. So we can see that 80% is on payments to help buy new vehicles, which is 45% of the total, and 35% of the total is on installing and operating charging and fueling stations in places such as multifamily homes and public locations. And so for each of these two categories, at least half the money has to be spent on projects that benefit people who live in or near heavily polluted and or low income communities. And the rest can be on, spent in anywhere in the state. So the remaining 20% of the funds that are raised would be on wildfire response and prevention. So I've listed the 6 areas of wildfire response and prevention that 20% is would be spent on, but number 1 here is what would be prioritized. So prioritized in the 20% is retaining housing, training, hiring permanent and seasonal firefighters to prevent and suppress wildfires. And then there's a number 5 other things that some of the money could be spent on. So wildfire detection and monitoring, fire suppression and safety infrastructure in the fire-prone areas, improving defensible space around homes and communities, grants for home hardening retrofits focused on low-income communities, and supporting programs including forest resilience, prescribed burns, watershed restoration, and vegetation management. So all this sounds pretty good. There's a little bit of background which will be important as we move into following the money. But there's some regulations that the state has passed related to zero emission vehicles. So one is that in 2020, the California Air Resources Board was directed to end the sale of new gas-powered cars in California by 2035. And then the next year in 2021, CARB adopted those regulations and set a percentage of new cars sold in the state to be zero emission in subsequent years, starting 8% by 2025 and increasing in those percentages until 2035 when 100% of new cars have to be zero emission. And then the next relevant thing is that in 2021, CARB adopted regulations requiring rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft to achieve a level of zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and to ensure 90% of their vehicle miles are electric. Okay, so there's quite a few pros and cons, and it does get a little bit complicated. But basically, the pros are about air pollution, climate action, getting more EVs on the road faster, and making sure that we have enough firefighting resources to address the increasing risk of catastrophic fires. This one I noted here is kind of a rebuttal to some of the where the money is coming from. But this proposition is expected to help Lyft and Uber reduce emissions from their operations and comply with that regulation. but the incentives and the infrastructure investments are not designed to specifically benefit them. It doesn't, and the money doesn't go directly to them. All right, another aspect is that the tax increase, it is a tax increase for sure, but it is only on the wealthy. So funding comes from basically the 0.1% of Californians that are most able to afford it. And then the last thing on the pros is that even with the state and federal commitments, current budgets are really insufficient to transition at the scale and speed needed. And on the con side, as we'll see in who's supporting this and who's not supporting it, California Teachers Association is not supporting this, and the concern that they've raised is that it could displace state budget funding for education. There is a constitutional limit on state appropriations, and this gets super wonky. I don't fully understand it myself, but it could require the state to reduce money to other programs to kind of make room for this new spending. Governor Newsom is opposed to this measure. There's a quote here from him: "A cynical scheme devised by a single corporation to funnel state income tax revenue to their company." And again, there's the rebuttal to that is essentially that, you know, this, yes, it would benefit the single corporation, which we'll see in a second, but that it doesn't only benefit them, it is benefiting everyone. All right, the other cons could be that it doesn't really address ways to reduce vehicle miles traveled. You know, just transitioning from gas-powered cars to EV cars is just a car for a car, and we also need to be reducing vehicle miles traveled, funding public transit, other transportation modes, and this measure doesn't do anything in that respect. There's some say that this thinning of the forests could be a questionable practice by CAL FIRE and might not be the best way to manage our forests. California already has some of the highest tax rates in the country. With inflation and possible recession, this is not the time to raise taxes. And some say it's not needed because California has already committed, even this year, to support EVs and related infrastructure with $10 billion. All right, so here's the kind of a list of supporters and opposition. So we see a number of officials, political parties, corporations, unions, organizations, and editorial boards. So there's quite a few in favor, quite a few opposed. And I also put in no position. Sierra Club is the one that is concerned about the questionable fire suppression practices. All right, so notably, political parties, the Democratic Party of California is in favor, whereas the Republican Party is opposed. We have a number of officials, high profile people we know that are in favor, and very notably, Governor Gavin Newsom is opposed. Corporations, we have Lyft in favor, none listed on the opposed. Unions, a couple on each side, that notably California Teachers Association, as I mentioned, is opposed. And editorial boards, also kind of split in the Bay Area, with San Francisco Chronicle Bay Area Reporter in favor, and the Mercury News and Los Angeles Times are opposed. All right, let's follow the money. Lyft is supplying about 95% of the total funding of this measure. Normally, I would see this graph and say, I'm definitely voting no, right? Because whoever's supporting that much money is probably, you know, going to get this huge benefit from it. However, I couldn't find exactly what direct benefit Lyft would be getting. And I don't really understand why I mean, certainly they would get a benefit because they have to transition all of their miles to, you know, zero emission. However, notably, Uber has no, there's no press from Uber. There's no dollars from Uber. Why isn't Uber in this game? I couldn't find it. I don't know why. Anyway, and on the no side, we've got almost $20 million spent by more, it seems like more entities, but often kind of millionaires and people who may not want their taxes raised. All right, and here's another follow the money. So again, you can see Lyft at the top. Got a union here, a few others. And then on the right-hand side, California Teachers Association has the most in the no category, and a number of CEOs and venture capital companies. There was a Forbes article just this last week saying, in recent months, a group of at least 9 tech and venture capitalist billionaires have contributed to the campaign against the measure, albeit in relatively small amounts. We've got the CEO of Netflix up here with $1 million in. Okay, polling data. Got 2 relevant polls showing, in both cases, showing support, kind of winning out, although a pretty large amount of undecided voters here from the most recent poll. All right, and so my opinion, I get, as I present, I get to say my opinion, but I am in favor of this proposition for the following reasons. So one is, this is climate action. And the largest contributor to greenhouse gases in California is vehicles. And transitioning to EVs, in addition to reducing vehicle miles traveled and improving public transit and all of that, which is not part of this, are important. And I think this tax will make a big dent in that. Air pollution is a very significant problem, and this, again, will help reduce that. It does include environmental justice and support for low-income populations. It funds adaptation to our more destructive wildfires. It is a tax on the wealthy. Someone mentioned it as like a Robin Hood proposition, and it does help reduce income disparity. It does benefit Lyft, and it probably also benefits Uber, but also their drivers who actually own those cars and will be the ones that are needed to transition. It benefits all drivers in California, and it benefits all people with lungs in California. And I've got some reference articles and videos here, but I will send out this slide deck. All right, it looks like we have some questions or comments. Carol.
Hi, Crystal. Thank you. I'm wondering, since this is a tax, does it need 2/3 to pass, 2/3 of the vote?
I don't know. In my research, I didn't see any reference to that. Does anyone else know?
This is I don't know if it's a constitutional amendment or an initiative statute, but it goes under regular state law. It's not a local initiative that would require 2/3.
All right, Max.
So the reason it's worth $45 million to Lyft to get in on this is that it's subsidizing future Lyft drivers. so as to make it easier for Lyft to find drivers who are willing to work for the extremely low pittance that Lyft is willing to provide for them. As we've seen what Lyft is willing to do in the last election when they ran up a ballot measure to try and feather their own nest. And because it locks in particular priorities without giving the legislature a chance to tinker with them as we gain better understanding of the problems that need solving, I'll be voting against it.
All right, thank you. Margaret. You're muted, or we can't hear you. All right, we'll come back to you. Colleen?
Thank you. I'm confused when they say electric cars. Where does hybrid fit in? Because they are gas, partially gas powered. And I think I had a second question, but I forgot what it was. Thank you.
Yes, so hybrids are not included. So this measure is about zero emission vehicles, which would be not necessarily all electric. It could be all hydrogen or other things, but yeah, hybrids are not being funded. Hybrids would benefit from the electric vehicle infrastructure at multifamily and public areas because they're plugged in. So they would certainly benefit, but the incentives for purchasing would be for zero emission vehicles.
Oh, I remember my second question now. Will local governments like our city be able to take advantage of, I don't know, rebates or take advantage of this to electrify our fleet faster?
I believe so. Yes, for like fleet purchases, there would be some incentives for that, yes.
Thank you.
And Julia?
So I think this is another trap. Originally, I had thought this was a no-brainer until I saw your presentation about the issue that the CTA raised, and they spent $2 million on this, or they're pacted. I was wondering what is like their typical spending of, you know, fighting some proposition, or I mean, I guess I want to know, get a sense of how serious this is for California schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not be able to answer that question about how much they typically spend, but Tara says it was 9 million on the other one. I do know that the rebuttal to that argument is that, you know, the fire things would be classified as an emergency spending, and so they wouldn't be part of that cap, and they wouldn't affect the education funding. And then the infrastructure spending would be not included because it's infrastructure. So it's not clear who is right. It's one of those who, again, you feel trapped because we don't know, but it's not clear that the education funds would actually be impacted or not. Margaret.
And I'm hoping you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, good.
I have a knee-jerk reaction to propositions like this. You know, let's do a little bit with CAL FIRE. Let's throw in something for the Lyft people. Let's do something, you know, make the wealthy pay more taxes. I don't like propositions like this. I always feel like they end up in court, cost us a bundle of money. I think the sentiment is there. My granddaughter's a CAL FIRE fighter. She gets she practically gets slave wages if anything, and one of my current gripes. But I just am going to vote no against this. I'm right in there with Max that it's too complicated. It's just, I don't trust Lyft. And why are they in this and Uber isn't? And we always have this sort of tax the wealthy thing to kind of bail us out of everything. And then you hear people leaving because the taxes in California are so high for the poor billionaires. So I'm not terribly sympathetic to the billionaires, but I just don't like complicated propositions that nobody can quite figure out exactly what they're all about. So I'm voting no.
Okay, you may notice my name is now Tara. I had to change computers. I'm still Crystal. Tara's right here next to me. So Roy.
Well, I raise the same question again. What's the legislature for if the people are going to do all the budgeting?
Colleen, your hand is still raised or raised again? I'm not sure.
No, not raised again.
Okay. All right, James.
Yes, I guess this is not taking money away from other programs, but taking money away from the very wealthy. And it has that advantage, I guess, for the rest of us, because it makes it very painless for the rest of us to make a decision like this, being in the majority, voting majority. I have a little bit some qualms about that because it is really just a form of raising a progressive income, just making the income tax more progressive. And it seems like a more straightforward way of doing it is just openly doing so and saying, okay, we're going to make our income tax more straightforward, increase the general fund that way. And from that general fund, we can then fund all of these things that this proposition would do. But all the things that it's doing, I think, are very good and would be very helpful, even though it benefits Uber and Lyft. It benefits everybody because it really deals with the problem of getting us switched over sooner rather than later to all electric vehicles. So it's definitely a good thing. I don't care that much for the way that it's being funded, especially because it's possible that this reduces pressure to increase our regular taxes the following year. If we increase the taxes to the rich through this, then there might be additional pressure to reduce our state taxes, income taxes proportionally, in which case we might come out not ahead at all. So I'm going to vote for this because it's just so damn good, for the environment and for our future.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, since the measure doesn't, gives preference to Lyft or Uber or these organizations, I think we should look at this as if some, nonprofit or somebody was proposing this and look at it on its merits. I think in general, we're nowhere near close to meeting our targets for climate change that we need to meet, even in California. And it's going to take some incentives and spending in order to accelerate this movement to for EVs and other climate issues. So also, I hear the argument about the legislature should do this, and they should, but really there's a lot of areas where our legislature is not meeting the needs of the public because of various reasons. One is the massive spending from lobbyists that go in there and prevent them from doing this stuff, which is why we are so far beyond the curve on meeting our climate change objectives. I wish the legislature would do this. And I hear Newsom opposing it because it would benefit Lyft, but that's just because they have a big fleet. It would benefit anybody with a big fleet. So who's making this transition and help them to make it faster. So I think, you know, yeah, the legislature should do this. A better argument might be if Newsom wants to suggest it, that he's got another plan to meet this goal of transition to EVs, or legislature's working on it, or something else. But he's not making that argument. He just says that we should vote against this because Lyft is funding it. So that's a concern I have. So I guess I would support this. I wish the legislature had acted instead, or even suggest they have an alternative, but I haven't heard that. So, you know, it's a workaround for the legislature because the legislature isn't responding quick enough. And this is a crisis situation, climate change. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Margaret, for your note in the chat. We are running low on time. I want to get to the last proposition. So if you can please put in your straw vote. I am not counting all of these, but I would say there's significantly, this was probably the one that has had the most, or maybe the arts one, the most variation between yeas and nays. All right, why don't we move on to the last one, which is flavored tobacco. And Sandy is going to present on that.
Could you re-co-host me? I had a little Zoom problem, so I'm not a co-host anymore.
Sure.
All right. So, whoops. So this is practically the opposite of all the things we've been complaining about the legislature not doing its job. So this is enforcing the new flavored tobacco law where the legislature did do its job. So in August of 2020, they passed a law that would ban flavored tobacco products. This includes pods for vape pens, tank-based systems, menthol cigarettes, and chewing tobacco, but it excludes premium cigars and hookah tobacco. By the way, as an aside, I looked that up because people used to tell me hookah tobacco wasn't tobacco and didn't have nicotine. That's not true. It's tobacco. At any rate, that's an aside. So this would apply to store purchases and vending machine purchases. So the point is the legislature actually did its job through the normal process. And, but if you don't like something that they've done, you can also stop it through a ballot measure if you can get the signatures. And guess who didn't like this? Big tobacco. So if you vote yes on this, it will let the law that was already passed take effect. So you would get decreased tobacco tax revenue, which there's some numbers here. Let's see, what was it? They're suggesting that could decrease tax revenue $100 million annually. Now that's interesting because the tax revenue is only so high because we tax tobacco a lot to try to stop people from smoking. So go figure. There will be decreased costs of health issues caused by smoking. There will be decreased youth smoking rates, we believe. This is particularly the point about flavored tobaccos is a lot of them are kind of marketed to kids. The no vote would say that the law cannot take effect, and we would keep getting those sweet, sweet tax revenues, which we could spend on sweet, sweet tobacco-related healthcare and sweet, sweet youth anti-smoking programs, because the youth would keep smoking. This is follow the money. So can everyone read this? If you notice, all of the dollars supporting this are tobacco companies. I didn't know RJ Reynolds had so many different companies that were all RJ Reynolds. Who knew? And the people that would like the law to take effect are people like Kaiser Permanente and the California Teachers Association and the Heart Association and the Lung Association. So at any rate, this is the situation. So our recommendation is that we vote yes on this and let the legislature keep doing its job and get rid of flavored tobacco products. And that's the end. So I guess I can manage my own questions. Sorry, I made Crystal do it before, but if I get this back up. Are there, I see, it's harder to do when you're screen sharing. I'm going to stop sharing. Got it. Okay. So are there any questions? I'm seeing people are starting to vote.
Made a pretty compelling case there.
I see Carol.
Ah, okay, Carol. Carol, you need to unmute.
Sorry. Isn't this a no-brainer? I mean, if we're gonna be, I don't even get it. Why there would be even anybody voting to let this thing, the tobacco companies keep doing what they're doing to our kids. I mean,
well,
hell.
The only people that supported it were the tobacco companies. I think that for them, we understand their motives.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
James.
I'd like to know, this is a general question, can the legislature make a law that prohibits phrasing questions in this form, where a yes means we go ahead and do what the legislature has already decided on?
No, this is the particular, this form of ballot measure is people saying, stop what you're doing and get rid of this law.
Well, I understand what it's saying, but it's not saying it that way. It's saying, shall we let the legislature law stay as written? And the answer is yes, we do want to keep it.
Right.
When actually the more straightforward way of saying it is, do we want to overturn this law? That's what it really should say. It should not be permitted to phrase, there are two ways of phrasing this, and one of the ways is misleading. That way it should not be allowed.
I don't think that we really have the ability to do that in this discussion. They work through that at the legislative analyst or Secretary of State's office, I believe.
Well, the state constitution writing was when they did that, and they decided it was less confusing this way.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't think we can change that with this vote.
Yes, keep the law as opposed to no.
So I would say yes, let the law happen. Well, I think everybody is now voting. So shall we vote?
Looks like most people have put in their opinion. Oh,
I will say one thing before I go to give credit. I got a lot of the information as my starting point from Voters Edge. Does everybody know about Voters Edge? Which is the League of Women Voters. I will put it in the chat. They have a very nice place where you can organize your votes. You record all your votes. You can go back and look at it. You can use it when you're filling out your ballots. I think it's very, very nice. And we love the League of Women Voters.
The League is sponsoring 2 candidates meetings this next week, if you guys didn't see this. One for the Fremont Union High School District Board on October 17th. I have heard that, well, Naomi told me this, that Linda Price, who we're all voting against, I hope, was presented very well at a recent candidates meeting. I don't know who sponsored it. And then the Sunnyvale City Council is on October 18th. Both of these are at 7 p.m. So you could probably go to the League and get, if you want to get on the site and find out where these are.
Right. So we've completed our proposition discussion, and any other announcements? I see we are a little bit over time, but if anyone else has announcements related to upcoming election, our next meeting is going to be after the November election. So
yeah, I'm just gonna say, I got my ballot in the mail a couple days ago, so I would expect people have gotten their ballots at this point.
That was my question. I'm sorry, I think because I'm a presenter, I don't have a hand for some reason. I have not received my ballot. So have most of you received your?
Yes.
Okay.
I have, but I know I have a friend that lives in Pioneer, which is by Lake Tahoe. She's still to have received anything like you. She has not received anything.
I mean, I received, the booklets and everything, but I haven't received my
I
ballot.
was gonna say, on the ROV site, I believe there's a way to track the status of the ballot, like how they've mailed it. So I think there's a way to do that on the ROV site. I have not double checked this, so I could be completely wrong, but I think there is.
On the 10th is what I read. They sent them out on the 10th, but I don't know what the holdup would be.
Ours arrived yesterday.
Is there anybody else on here that didn't get it yet?
Margaret listed in the chat, she hasn't gotten her ballot.
Oh, Margaret lives near me, I think. Okay. Then if it doesn't come on Monday, but I will try to track it, like you said.
Okay, any other announcements?
I'll drop the tracking site in the chat.
Oh, good, thanks.
Thank you, everybody. This has been really, really helpful. Appreciate the work of the presenters.
Yeah, these are complicated, sometimes deliberately complicated, and it helps.
Which is why I vote against them.
Colleen, I saw your hand and then it disappeared. Did you want to say something?
No, I was trying to clear my vote.
All right, with that, I want to echo the comments of those in the chat and those who spoke just now, thanking the presenters. This was really helpful to have all the research and the pros and the cons laid out for us. I think we will put the presentations up, and of course this meeting is recorded, so you can always refer back to that. And with that, we'll close the meeting.
Bye.
Bye.